Hello and welcome. I am Samantha Farinacci and I am the Director of Spiritual Life here at Oaks Christian Online High School. I just wanted to take a moment to offer you a short video that gives you a brief introduction to a couple of areas of Christian education here at Oaks Christian Online School. In other words, I wanted to give you a slight glimpse into how we think about what makes our education at Oaks Online distinctively Christian. So the first answer to this question is, of course, that it is in step with our mission. In other words, that we are people here at Oaks Online who think of ourselves as having a mission and a purpose that is uniquely and distinctively Christian. And this comes from our mission statement, which begins with a dedication to Christ and ends with an understanding of knowledge and wisdom being anchored in God's grace. And so this is the purpose of our school, is to embody and expose to our students a knowledge and wisdom that is grounded in God's grace. And we do this out of dedication to Christ. And so I wanted to offer a couple of ways in which we try to do this. There are actually many ways in which we embody this mission. I'm only going to speak about two in this video. The first one is in our theological engagement, and the second one is in our Christian pedagogy. And what each of these has in common is that they represent a voice to our students. So the first case is in the case of our courses, the course voice, and the second case is the teacher voice, which is the specific voice of the instructor in any given class. So beginning with the course voice, I wanted to give you a snippet from our subject matter expert training. Now, a subject matter expert is the person who writes our courses. So this course writer will work with our course developer to make sure that our courses meet the quality and standards of several different groups, including NCAA and UC and all these different groups, but also they meet with me personally to make sure that they're able to understand how to do the theological engagement within our courses as well. So this is a direct quote from the training that they receive, from one of the parts of their training that they receive related specifically to theological engagement. And we'll talk in a moment about what theological engagement is, but for now, I just want to introduce you to it here. At Oaks, we want students to excel at and appreciate fully each subject individually, but also be encouraged to think deeply about what holds all knowledge together. So this language of holding knowledge together serves a couple of purposes. One, it encourages our students to think in an interdisciplinary way, which is important to us at Oaks. But the reason that it's important to us is for this second reason, which is that we believe that a personal God holds all of these ideas together in order to reveal and expose broader and significant areas of truth and joy and beauty and goodness and so on. And so we want to make sure that students are given specific incidences and specific methodology for being able to encounter the learning that they are experiencing here in this particular way. So the theological engagement is one of the ways that we ensure that this happens within our courses. This is our theological engagement statement. In other words, it's how we describe what our theological engagement is within a course and also what purpose it serves. Now, if you would like to pause this video and read the whole script for yourself, the whole statement for yourself, you're welcome to do that. Otherwise, I just have a few portions that I would like to highlight for you in this at this time. So the first speaks really to the purpose of the theological engagement. And this is to provide meaningful reflection on a subject's purpose and intrinsic value. In other words, the theological engagement in courses is meant to give students a comprehensive vision for the value and importance of what they're studying. This is important not only for a kind of Christian purpose, in other words, that students are able to see the kind of theological or spiritual value of what they're studying. But as it turns out, it's actually important for pedagogy as well, because when students are able to understand the deeper and more sophisticated value of what they're studying, they're that much more likely to be engaged. Following in this theme, another part that I wanted to point out is that the purpose of this theological engagement is to give students a chance to explore the broader truths and meanings behind, beside, and beneath what they are learning. In other words, students are being encouraged to see not just their subjects as a passing on of information or even a kind of simplistic investigation of knowledge, but instead that they're being given a chance to tap into a bigger and broader understanding of truth with a capital T, and that they're able to kind of feel surrounded by this truth, so that they're able to see how what they're studying has implications and meanings for all areas of their life. Again, this is important not only for developing Christian identity, but is also important just for any kind of identity formation. A unified and consistent portrait of truth is actually psychologically important for learning in the lives and minds of students. And so this is, again, if you're beginning to see a pattern here, we find that in pursuit of our theological engagement, we end up landing on things that also are just best pedagogy. And so that's why we really feel confident in our ability to speak a Christian truth within these courses, with not only without stepping away from those subjects themselves, but actually enhancing and broadening and deepening them, so that actually good pedagogy and good theology tend to line up in pretty successful ways in our courses. Now, there are 4 areas specifically of theological engagement that we focus on here at Oaks. There are other kind of subsets to these values that will, of course, appear as we look at specific cases, and we will look at a specific case in a moment. But I wanted you to first just see the 4 kind of core areas that we use to sort of think about the theological engagement within our courses. So when a subject matter expert sits down to write the courses, they are holding in mind these 4 areas, which are again addressed in the trainings and also in the interactions that we have with the subject matter experts more one-on-one basis. So the first one has to do with humble excellence. So sometimes in a secular educational environment, students are encouraged to see the obtainment of knowledge as a pursuit of power. And what's kind of distinctively Christian about the way that we understand knowledge here is that we try to model our pursuit of knowledge in the witness of a God who had all power and chose to relinquish that power in becoming powerless, in his humbleness, in his humility, in taking on the nature of a human being. So when we present knowledge, we do this for the purpose of helping students see how knowledge actually can create opportunities for generosity and service, as opposed to just kind of intellectual lordship. And so we try to make sure that that is apparent in our courses. The second way in which we theologically engage our courses has to do with self-critique. As you read through the scriptures, this is one of the few kind of historical texts that is constantly challenging its own presuppositions. A quick example of this, if you look in the New Testament, you will see that the disciples are going to end up being the kind of heroes and people who are esteemed in by the people who are writing these books, and yet they are constantly portrayed with all of their faults and with all of their shortcomings. And there are countless other examples of this where the Bible is able to kind of self-critique and to be kind of honest about its own shortcomings. And this is really what we're hoping that our courses are also able to do, which is to provide students with lots of opportunity to question and dispute different worldviews, and in particularly all of the different facets of worldviews that emerge from each of the disciplines. So in other words, we want students to feel confident to challenge and critique ideologies as they encounter them. And we do that not just for its own sake, but because we actually see this witness in the scripture as being a mark of God's people. Thirdly, we're hoping to use our courses in a way that presents the subjects that students are learning as an opportunity to enhance empathy. So the way that this is sort of working in our courses is that as students are being asked to take on the mind of philosophers and poets and historians, that they're able to learn from them, and in doing so to kind of practice empathy. So education is an opportunity to practice the discipline and the effort and the energy that is required to try on someone else's brain. And that's something that we really encourage at Oaks in each of our courses, is that students are being stretched to look beyond their own perspective, and that in doing so, they're actually harnessing an empathetic imagination. Finally, this final idea speaks to creativity. So as we acknowledge here that God is a creator and that the Holy Spirit kind of moves among us like the wind, that there's this kind of essence of imagination and creativity that our courses are meant to expose to students. So this is a little bit different. These two kind of work in tandem, the thoughtful self-critique and imaginative creativity. So we often think about critical thinking as well as creative thinking. And many schools are interested in both of these areas. But what makes Oaks Christian Online unique is that we think about those areas in a distinctively Christian way, and also a college preparatory way. But speaking here about the particular Christian attitude towards these things, it does actually affect the way the creative thinking happens when students understand that they are tapping into the image of a creator God within them as they do this. And so what we're hoping is that our courses, quite frankly, are filled with joy for students, that they find them kind of stimulating and joyful, so that they're able then to use the courses that they are encountering to then follow God's example and be creative and be artistic in the same way that God as a creator and God as an artist has done this with the world that he has made. So I know that it's a lot to take in, and just hearing kind of objectively and abstractly how we do our theological engagement. So I wanted to give you a concrete example from our marine biology class. So this is just one single case where a student is going to encounter theological engagement in a marine biology course. So this is a discussion. So if you haven't had a chance to see our courses yet, discussions are just opportunities for students to talk with each other and with their teachers. And so they're given prompts that then they're allowed to engage with each other and with their instructor about those different prompts. So this is a discussion. You just learned about the scientific method and how it has impacted the way we think about all sciences, but especially marine biology. Interestingly, this approach to thinking has shaped how we think about many other subjects as well, including psychology, anthropology, and even theology. What this means is that the emergence of the scientific method is actually changing how we understand human life and even the supernatural. Take a moment to look at this list of familiar things below and pretend that you are explaining each of them to someone who is only able to process information using the scientific method. In other words, the only way they will understand what these things are is if you use the scientific method to explain them. Write how you would explain each of these things using the scientific method: a bookshelf, a dog, generosity, and prayer. And then this is the part where they would really kind of discuss with their classmates and with their instructor. When you have finished, answer these questions. How effective did you find the scientific method to be for explaining each of these things? What has this taught you about the advantages and disadvantages of using the scientific method to discover and relay truth? So what you can see from this example is that all of the different areas of theological engagement are being addressed. First of all, even as a student is rigorously pursuing a kind of accurate and complete understanding of the scientific method as it is applied to marine biology at the level that they're learning, they're simultaneously being given a kind of humility towards that method, right? They're able to see the limitations of that method, even as they are studying it. Secondly, they're also able to self-critique, right? They're able to see how they were effective and how they were ineffective in their own understanding and application of the scientific method. They're also able to see more widely how the scientific method itself is effective and ineffective. And so they're able to use their critical thinking in order to examine how successfully this method has portrayed and communicated truth. So instead of teaching the scientific method as the only way of accessing truth, we're giving students a chance to kind of consider both the benefits and the limitations of this perspective on truth, or this access to truth. Likewise, they're also being given a chance to think in a way that is different than themselves. In this case, not only are they being able to learn the scientific method from the marine biologist or the marine biology textbook that they're utilizing in the course, but also from each other. They're able to kind of hear how each of their classmates was able to consider truth in these various ways. And in doing so, they're practicing an empathetic imagination. They're practicing this action of taking on the mind of one that is not themselves. Finally, they're being asked to think in a creative, imaginative way. And this is really mostly coming from these four examples, right? Because since each of these four items are so different from each other, students are going to have to think about applying the scientific method in very unique ways in order to be able to speak to this hypothetical person that only is able to receive information, say, through the five senses, or using the various pieces of the scientific method that they're learning in this course. And so students have to kind of tap into their imagination to think about how to do that, and then, of course, to realize the shortcomings of this method to be able to successfully communicate these four complex things. And so hopefully, as students try this exercise, they're able to use their creativity and imagination, but also to be able to see how even with creativity and imagination, they need more than just the scientific method to speak about some of these more meaningful and deep kind of realities in the world. But that at the same time, when speaking about a dog and a bookshelf, it's very effective and useful to be able to use this tool. So while they're learning the tool, they're also learning the shortcomings and limitations of the tool. And that's really what we're asking of students as we look at these four different areas of theological engagement. Now that you've had a little bit of an insight into how our theological engagement works, and also been able to look at a specific example in our courses, I want to move on to speaking about Christian pedagogy. So again, just to recap, our courses have two voices in them. One is the voice of the course itself, and the second voice, is the voice of the Christian teacher, his or herself. And so we first want to make sure that our courses have theological engagement, but then we also want to make sure that our teachers, our instructors who are walking students through those courses are also kind of having a Christian pedagogical perspective. And we have four areas that I'm going to move through very quickly that we really focus on when speaking about Christian pedagogy with our teachers. The first one has to do with the Trinity. Now, if you'll notice from each of these, the way that we think about Christian pedagogy is that we let our pedagogy emerge from our theology. In other words, we begin with Christian truths, and then we let those Christian truths speak into how we teach and instruct students. So when we begin with the Trinity, we see that the natural pedagogical response is to see that learning happens in relationships, because even God's self is a community of three persons in relationships. And so if that is the ultimate truth, the ultimate revelation of God, then we want to follow suit and make sure that we have a pedagogy that reflects that community nature that God has revealed to us. And so we make sure that first and foremost that our instructors and teachers are trained in how to relate to students in an online environment, in a specifically Christian, generous and loving and humble way. And we have several trainings and opportunities where teachers are able to learn how to do that. Secondly, we begin with a theology of Christ, which is that Christ, being in nature God, but also human, came down as God to take on the nature of a human being who was, again, fully God and fully human, and that act of stepping down was an act of humility. And so we want to make sure that our teachers are always conscientious about having a humility to their interactions with students. And this is, again, very distinctively Christian, because instead of asking students to kind of rise up, we're asking our teachers to come down in the same way that Christ came down to us. And so we have, again, several trainings and instructions about what that looks like concretely for our teachers. But the basic point here is that we want our teachers to really understand that it's their responsibility to come down to our students in the same way that Christ came down to us. Thirdly, we focus on scripture. So at Oaks, we claim that the Old Testament and New Testament are authoritative on matters of faith. And what this does in terms of pedagogy is that it sees our instruction as being anchored in a wider story. And so what the Old and New Testaments reveal to us is that there is a grand kind of human narrative happening in the world, and that as we encounter each of these different subjects, whether it be American history or rhetoric or algebra, all of these subjects are kind of teeming with the different pieces of this grand story. And that story is essentially creation, fall, reconciliation, consummation, right? And so when students are able to see that the subjects that they're learning are grounded in that broader, bigger story, then that really encourages them to want to learn, first of all, but secondly, it also encourages them to see the importance of what they're learning because it fits in with a grand story that they are able to be a part of. And so our teachers are asked to be familiar with this story revealed in the Old and New Testaments, but then also to know how to engage with students about these bigger and deeper questions that are naturally coming out of their courses. So some examples here: what does it mean to be human? Does life have meaning? Is there a God? What is moral? What is just? What is true? How can we know what we know? We want students to make sure that they're being given a chance through their relationship with their teachers to examine and consider these kind of fun and interesting questions that emerge from each of the different disciplines that they're studying. And finally, we see that in the Christian faith, community is highly stressed, right? In most cases, God is working with an entire nation or with an entire church or with 12 disciples. You know, that there's this value for partnerships, for camaraderie in the Christian witness. And so what we do in an online setting, and this is where it's kind of exciting to see how it's working, particularly at the online school, is that we are sort of demanding that we have as engaging and as meaningful connections happening in our learning as we would in a live physical setting. And so as teachers, we really have to be conscientious, and our teachers are instructed in how to do this, about how to make sure that even in an online setting, students are developing a sort of Oaks Christian online community, and that they're able to learn with classmates and with instructors in a way that is developing real friendships, because that's how learning goes, is that we learn in community with each other. So those are the different areas of Christian pedagogy that we offer to our teachers as kind of the core of what we expect at Oaks Online. But then there's kind of the how question of kind of how do we help our teachers do that? Because of course we do require that our teachers be Christian in order to work here, but we do not require that they have experience working in a Christian school. And so some of them have a lot of experience in thinking about how their subjects fit within a broader Christian mindset, and some of them do not. And that is completely fine either way. And so we have several ways that we make sure that our teachers are able to grow in this area, regardless of their level of experience with being in a Christian educational environment. So at every time that we gather, we do a very simple devotion, but this is based on a whole year theme that we go through together, so that teachers and staff are able to kind of work together in a spiritual way, and be able to kind of anchor what they're doing in a theological context. And so sometimes those devotions are more mindful and they're more instructional, and sometimes they're more personal and spiritual. But either way, this is a really important part of our Christian culture. Secondly, we have interdisciplinary live sessions. So in several of the other courses besides Bible and spiritual life, we have a kind of Christian presence there that's different than just the normal theological engagement. Let me give you a practical example. In the case of government, for example, we had an incident where the teacher asked me to speak in one of her live sessions about the history of government in the Bible, and kind of developing a biblical context for government. And so that's a case where it's not built into the course, but it's kind of supplemented in that live setting, so that students are able to see how studying government is kind of identified in the scriptures. And there are several incidences where this happens, where we kind of have some crossover between the theology Bible department and the other departments of the school as well. We also, from time to time, have live trainings where teachers are flown in from around the world and are given an opportunity to learn from the teaching that we offer on this subject. And that's always a really positive experience for our teachers. Because we can't always meet live, we also have online trainings that teachers are able to participate in, where they're able to learn about the distinctively Christian and distinctively Oaks Christian ways that we do education. We also have several peer-to-peer kind of mentorships that form mostly informally, but sometimes formally, among our teachers, so that teachers are able, particularly new teachers, to kind of capture and understand and kind of assimilate into the Oaks Christian culture that we've tried to create here. So there are several ways, these are just even a few of them, that we try to encourage and help our teachers to kind of help us build, and also help them encounter the Christian culture that exists here at Oaks. Now, again, I realize that this was a very short introduction to what is a very large topic, and so I would imagine that anyone watching this recording would have several questions. And so I want to encourage you to utilize our website to investigate further any questions that you have. I've listed a couple of areas that you may be curious about after hearing this talk. Perhaps you're curious to understand more about our Bible and spiritual life courses. Perhaps you're more interested in the specifics in how we technically build Christian courses. Perhaps you're interested in faith development in students. So how do we actually encourage spiritual growth and spiritual nourishment in our students? Perhaps you're interested in the role of parents and how we try to encourage and support parents in developing the spirituality of students. Perhaps you're interested in how we engage with students who are not Christian. As a reminder, we do not require that students be Christian at all in order to attend Oaks Online, and so we happily have plenty of students from many different religious backgrounds and even from no religious background. So perhaps you're interested in learning about how that works, or perhaps you have a question of your own. So again, I just want to direct you to our Oaks Christian Online School website, and you can find all of the contact information that you would need there in order to seek the help that you would need in uncovering some of these topics. Otherwise, thank you for listening, and I hope that this was helpful in giving you a small window into how we think about Christian education here at Oaks Christian Online School.